Thunder, 85. He's on stage.
X
Is your Smash Summit 8 champion.
Grand finals in the last 12 months, and the slight shake of the head from Boaster says everything you could possibly need to know.
Video games have always played a big role in my life, with some games having different reasons than others, some being a competitive outlet, a medium of art to consume, and or a way for me to socialize and find a sense of community. But with the games I mainly consume, there's this overarching idea that I remain interested in the medium for the many ways that emotions are portrayed and felt, whether those emotional moments be through the games themselves, outside content, or other people involved in a game scene. I just really enjoy when video games can evoke some sort of complex and strong emotional response. While it's not exclusive to these types of games, I seem to reminisce on narrative, esports, and casual multiplayer titles, which that last one might be a bit of a double-edged sword on this topic, and maybe the same thing could be said for esports, but that'll be something for later. So, with that aside, when it comes to the world of video games, when you ask people, hey, what game makes you feel really emotional? A large chunk will likely answer either with a game that heavily emphasizes its stories and characters, or Run from cool math games. Listen man, you'd actually be surprised. I tested this shit, and here's a graph, here's another graph, and I can conclude that I have no idea what I just said in the last 10 seconds or so. But with narratives, it goes without saying that these types of games are kind of meant to make you feel something and commentate about life, similar to how a book or film can, only this time there is way more interaction, like mashing X. Oh boy. There's games like Red Dead Redemption 2 with its brutal character deaths happening rapidly, even in gameplay sequences that help you feel how intense the moment is, yet forcing you to still put your reaction on hold just to fight and survive in the unforgiving world of the Wild West. There's Celeste with its level progression and the concept of constantly trying over and over again to climb a mountain that represents the obstacles of self-loathing, grievances, and acceptance. Then there's Kingdom Hearts with its boss fight patterns and the accompanying atmospheres that can be very telling of the character's mental space and what the fight means to them, not just as enemies but as people in the greater storyline. There's Undertale, and to a degree the Mother series, where you could go back and reminisce on your journey as you look to see how the world has changed based on your progression and interactions. There's Final Fantasy, specifically 15 and 7, because those are my personal favorites, and how those games put you in a position where you're kind of in it for the long haul with your team, and you get to connect and learn about them through the lens of the game's respective main characters. It's that last part though, that experience through the lens of the main character, because unlike other mediums of art, video games have the option to hold your hand and provide you an experience that more closely represents the emotional investment behind what it's like to be outlaws that struggle to escape their pasts, a mountain climber that struggles to come to terms with their identity and the various decisions they've made, a kid that's been pulled away from a life of peace, a kid meaning to explore the world only to be placed in circumstances they never asked for, or an angsty guy that has to enjoy the fleeting moments he has with his friends and learn what it means to be a hero, even if it's a position they didn't quite sign up for. It's the moments of gameplay where you really feel immersed in the world as if you are the main character, and you no longer just relate to the character on a metaphorical level. You actually got to somewhat experience the very struggles and achievements they went through via gameplay. Let's go back and take Celeste as an example. You play as Madeline and you scale a mountain, and if you played the game and went through the commentary behind the story, you might have found that one of the ways the mountain is interpreted is that it's meant to represent this cycle of self-loathing that you try so hard to break. This cycle is represented in the gameplay where you constantly have to try over and over again at the same part of the level, and as you advance, you might learn something new, but still feel like there's this constant resistance, as if things keep getting harder despite you genuinely progressing. All those moments in gameplay have you feeling an emotion that can, at the very least, somewhat resemble the feelings of being set back where you are in real life. Those learning moments in game where everything is clicking can resemble feelings of internal clarity or discovery. And those achievements in gameplay can resemble that of overcoming a mental or logistical roadblock. So in a way, you feel that cycle as a player and can then relate to Madeline, because even if you haven't experienced what she has in a literal or metaphorical sense, you get at least a bit more relatability to her because you experienced the gameplay representative of those experiences. All this to say that in narrative games, you get an extra sense of perspective through the gameplay that helps you feel something more close to what the characters are actually feeling. And for Celeste specifically, this game's dialogue is told through text, so think about the potential there is when you add a bunch of other elements like human acting into the mix, like with Red Dead Redemption 2 or modern Final Fantasy titles. But anywho, it's through that different kind of perspective and interactivity where you can really get invested into each moment every game has to offer. And that makes every emotional part feel that much more impactful. And that's what makes narrative games so unique in terms of that emotional impact they provide us. It's this entirely different way to relate to characters that feel more akin to a first-hand experience. Alright, well, put that first-hand shit aside unless you're a professional player in a major title, because it's time to talk about esports. Yay! Now, when you think esports and emotional moments, you might think of and while yes, those are some highly emotional moments in gaming, there's the other sides of the spectrum here. There's very obvious heartbreaks of losses and the overwhelming feeling of victory, but none of that would really mean anything without the storylines that follow. There's things like rivalries, long-standing struggles with issues in or out of the game, and in a local community, it's even getting to know these people at a personal level that makes the buildup of watching matches so intense. And while esports as a market and spectacle is kind of exhausting at this point for the community currently being cultivated, there's no denying that the emotional investments coming from storylines in esports are ones that kind of make consuming that side of the medium a bit more worth it. Take a recent major win from Melee player Hungrybox, who I'm not even the biggest follower of, but I know he didn't win a super major in like, what, 3 years? And he just did recently with Genesis X2, where he literally cried because the feeling of a victory this big hasn't been present in his career for quite some time, and people were genuinely questioning if he could keep up in today's meta.
We have here from
Let the tears flow, my friend, because
right.
You have sufficiently earned this one. Hungrybox, your Genesis X2 champion.
Or take moments of losses with another Melee player like Amsa, who had suffered so many losses and was just known for keeping a smile on his face despite that. But he would occasionally just feel that extra burden that his big break just left his grasp.
Looking like it's Kurt.
Can he get out?
Kurt, he
Man,
cannot.
wow. Great stuff. That was an amazing set. Amsa clearly reeling back.
Oh, the handshake.
Thankfully though, he did end up winning several majors, which is only made extra impressive by the fact that he did it with a character widely considered to be unviable with serious competition, something that's only really been done by Axe, a Pikachu player who also had a whirlwind of emotions when he managed to win his first major tournament.
85, he's on stage. Is your Smash Summit 8 champion?
As you can tell, I'm very invested in the Melee space as a whole, hence. But I'd like to show off a smaller moment from a different game, like this.
But this is SVB, leadership at its finest. Flower trying his best, to keep it focused. So much pressure on this guy since his World Cup appearance. He dominated there, took the world by storm. Hasn't had too much playtime here in the Overwatch League, despite New York Excel putting him in on mask, getting him experience, building up that confidence. But again, you're just throwing him into the deep end here if you're the New York coaches.
It's these types of interactions where you could feel that these teammates mean a lot to each other, and combining that with a story behind their individual and organizational journeys, there is just so much to get invested into with esports past the spectacle, beyond the gameplay, beyond the fancy production, and beyond the brands. And I think being within the esports space, there are so many personalities within players that aren't shown at all, so getting glimpses of them in these more vulnerable states can be very touching moments for audiences, especially when we can closely relate to the feeling of having played the game and feeling frustrated when things don't work after investing so much time and effort, and one day things just eventually click. And I don't know, maybe I just added this segment to talk about esports because I like uh-oh, are they going in for a kiss? Mwah. Anyways, now this was supposed to be the part where I talk about party games and the multiplayer experiences that are supposed to be just pure fun for the whole family. But I realized that there's a problem with these games. Now, okay, don't get me wrong, these games do have highly emotional moments. I'm not going to discredit them for that. Nor do I even think that these games themselves are the problem. I think it's great that we can enjoy games purely for the fun moments, but at the same time, I feel like there has been such an exhausting amount of exposure to these games, along with a shift in attitudes to treat every game, regardless of the developer's intent, to dilute every video game experience into something solely of entertaining value. And that's not inherently a problem with the games themselves, but I think it speaks towards the much larger issue of media culture leaning more and more towards everything is a joke, or it's not that deep, or being non-gaffers, which honestly is a big topic to talk about, so that's a separate thing. But within the video game bubble, I think this shift has most people leaning towards video games as solely an entertainment medium, which is why we see games like Among Us, Lethal Company, Repo, and so on taking most of the spotlight. Meanwhile, most games that attempt to tap into emotions with more depth can be left to fleeting trends or falling into niche audiences and not garnering anywhere near as much resonance in general audiences as games like Undertale, Red Dead 2, or The Last of Us Part 1 have. Part 1. Only Part 1. Which really sucks to think about, in that this shift in culture has affected what we consume in this medium that has so much potential to feel emotional in ways other art forms can really struggle with. But also, this is based on my own observations of what I hear in conversations, so it very much could be exclusively my experience. But I have listened to other people and they couldn't really find many titles that released in the past few years that really gave them an experience they feel emotionally attached to. Okay, so real quickly, I actually want to talk about my observations in esports, as I realized I forgot to record a proper segment in how this part of the video game sphere is affected by this attention shift. And for esports, it's kind of twofold. So like I said before, with video games kind of being looked down on more than it did the past 1 or 2 decades, I want to say, like, we have gone back to the point where video games are generalized as being a waste of time, but anyone who consumes video games in a non-destructive manner, specifically a non-destructive manner, let's get that out of the way, they know that there's a lot of value to video games in the same way there is value to consuming any other expressive medium. Because even bringing up the idea of esports being a part of your livelihood is now seen as, holy shit, this guy is a fucking bum. When just a few years ago, being good at esports titles, or even just being involved in a competitive scene for production or logistics, was seen as something interesting, novel, and cool. With that though, people are less enticed to be a part of esports communities because they're gonna literally get primary school bullied and shoved in a fucking locker, which ultimately pulls people away from being able to view and experience these emotional moments in esports. On top of this, attention from these emotional moments can be put even further under the radar by there being so much viewership in esports based drama. And I'm not even talking about moral dilemmas, which is actually worthwhile. I'm talking more about personal beef between two people, and then audiences can sometimes get really parasocial about it, and bada bing, bada boom, there you have it. A formula to pull attention away from things that are actually worth getting emotionally invested into. At this point, I'm kind of rambling, but to just wrap up my observations, also because I'm running out of storage space, both narrative games and emotional storylines in esports are not uncommon by any means. It's just that with the media culture's sudden shift to devalue video game consumption, it's gone to a point where these emotional moments that once felt more common in mainstream media are now given so much less attention, with more lighthearted games or unproductive, borderline parasocial discussion taking center stage instead. And that's on top of the effects that discouraging video game consumption can have, so that people can't even discover these emotional aspects in the first place, which honestly, man, like, I could keep talking about that part for so long. With that being said, why should you even bother worrying about the emotional aspects of video games taking up less of the spotlight? Shouldn't video games just be fun? And, well, yeah, they should be fun. But like literally any other artistic medium, it doesn't have to necessarily stay within that bubble. You can have your fun pieces of music, film, fine arts, and literature. But you could also explore how those mediums can extend less into that fun territory and more into something thought-provoking. And in a medium like video games, which can hold a lot of storytelling elements in or out of the game, there's so much to get invested in and so much to experience beyond the fun parts. Games can have moments that are absolutely gut-wrenching. Games can have moments that make you feel uncomfortable with your own values. Games can make you feel motivated and inspired. But most of these emotional moments in video games can make you feel like you learned something, either about yourself or the world around you. Whether that be through the relatability of characters or players, you can feel what they feel with so much intensity through having at least loosely experienced what they've gone through, and it creates a better sense of empathy between you and the personalities of the games. And that's kind of what makes the emotional experiences behind video games so special. It's just the medium can vary in so many different ways, between traditional storytelling elements to the interactivity to the communities cultivated. So with all this being said, maybe it's a good time to pay more attention to those story-rich titles and to the storylines that make the people that play video games so human. Because currently, it's been feeling to me like the notion behind video games are regressing towards it being a waste of time and nothing but slop, which, yeah, sometimes it is. But I think this gives us the opportunity to show people how video games can move us in unique ways and how they can resonate with us for the rest of our lives.
Well, what can I say? You guys are the best.